Thank you very much, Sean. Really enjoyed seeing all these startups presenting around the world and appreciate everyone dialing in from around the world for our Postal Service Innovation Day. We were really hoping to do this day in person, but obviously given the circumstances, we're now doing it virtually. But I think it's really powerful that we can utilize the global network of postal services and get all sorts of postal services across the world on this webinar today. And I'm especially excited about the panel. We do have postal services representing America, Europe, and Asia. So we have Ando's son, who has moved to Silicon Valley from Japan Post and is leading their innovation activities here in Silicon Valley. We also have Sachin Agarwal, who has worked with us for over 3 years and has been a great partner of ours over the last few years. And then we have Roland from Swiss Post, who's actually been a partner of Plug and Plays for about 5 years, actually, since Suzanne Ruoff, or the previous CEO of Swiss Post, visited us. I remember them doing great pilots after their first visit with Matternet, and after the first time they met Matternet, and then also doing a lot of activities around autonomous buses as well in Switzerland, kind of showcasing them as an innovation leader. So excited to have them on board, and then also excited to have Brody, who we became friends with through the supply chain network, and he's been on previous panels with myself and obviously works with many postal services around the world, leading Accenture's global kind of postal service practice. So I will just let the panelists introduce themselves for just a minute or two, and then we'll dive right into the discussion. Okay, we'll start with Sachin. You can please introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure, thanks, Mike. Excited to be here. So I work with the United States Postal Service. I lead the Open Innovation Program capability for the Postal Service, looking at startups and other innovation partners to accelerate the adoption of new technologies. I also work internally evaluating new ideas, evaluating new operating or business models that we can adopt as we look to the future. So excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks a lot, Sachin. Okay, let's the next speaker. Let's please have you introduce yourself, Ando-san from Japan Post.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for the intro. And this is Yuichi Ando from Japan Post, Silicon Valley. We opened up a Silicon Valley office 14 months ago. Actually, physical location is in Plug and Play. And we are seeing a lot of startups from around the globe. And just like today's deal flow, we have a constant pitch exposure. And Japan Post is unlike US Postal Service or other postal service operators. Our stocks is publicly traded on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, and parent holding is 60% owned by the government. So I think we have the mandate of the universal service, as well as, we need to look for the profitability as well. So it's a delicate balance. And, we are lucky to have a Silicon Valley presence as a postal service operators. Not many, postal service operators having the Silicon Valley presence. So we are lucky. And partly because, we've diversified our business portfolio, and we are, one of the largest players in the financial service as well. But my primary responsibility is to work with the startups in the logistics and kind of the startups we've seen today in the pitch. And lastly, really thanks everyone working the front lines of the postal service during this difficult time in COVID-19. Have a lot of respect for those workers. Honored to be in the panel. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. It's everyone around the world, I think, appreciates these workers more than ever right now. Okay, let's have the next speaker introduce themselves. Roland from Swiss Post.
Well, hello everyone. Hello from Switzerland. Yes, I'm Roland. I work for Swiss Post. I'm head of innovation culture, a part of the innovation management team on a corporate level. As Susan Ruoff said earlier, we are active in the communication market, the logistics market, the public transportation market, and also banking, financing market. And we are 100% owned by Swiss government, but still we are facing similar challenges as my colleague from Japan Post just mentioned. Yes, we are actively innovating, and me, myself, focusing on innovation culture, I slowly move towards more a strategic approach, portfolio management, innovation governance, setting the rules and the stage for others to be innovative. And I'm very happy to be part of this panel, and I'm happy to share my insights.
Thank you, Roland. Okay, let's have our last panelist introduce himself. And I think he provides a very interesting perspective, given he's working with all these postal services around the world. So please introduce yourself, Brody, and share a little bit about what you're doing at Accenture.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike, and great to be part of this fantastic panel. My name is Brody Buhler, and I'm the Global Managing Director of Accenture's Post and Parcel practice, so the work that we do for companies that deliver things globally. We've worked with over 40 of these organizations. We have an ongoing presence across the globe, and so it allows us to do a lot of in-depth research about what's happening in the industry and how things are progressing, and how each of the various geographies and the postal players in each of them are adapting to this change. So what an exciting time to be here. And I'll echo Ando-san's comments about those on the front line. Never has that national infrastructure been more important, and we've got some very brave and dedicated people out there delivering day to day. So proud to be part of this panel and be with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited to have this panel together, and never been more crazy and interesting times, I think, in the Postal Service world. I know e-commerce volumes are skyrocketing. Mail volumes have gone down globally. And then I was reading about UPS, how they became less profitable at the end of the quarter, even though their volumes went way up because their B2B business went down. So I think it's definitely very interesting times. And during times like this, I think technology and innovation are going to play a more critical role, where you have to rethink business models and figure out which technologies you can adopt to manage this crazy situation we're in. I think we've heard from a lot of postal services that robotics, automation are becoming critical, and that some of these startups, some of the ones you just saw, could have solutions that they could have a good benefit for safety of deliveries or automation inside of a warehouse, where you're not necessarily relying on human-to-human contact in the case of the coronavirus. So I'd love to hear everyone's feedback on the current situation with the coronavirus around the world. How are you guys working with new technologies? What are the new technologies that are going to have an impact? So let's start off with Sachin. Would love to hear your insights from United States Postal Service.
Mike, I think you've mentioned a couple of the trends where we are seeing mail volume get hit in the short run. And part of that is because a lot of that mail volume is reliant on advertising. And we're seeing advertising go down across the board. And Google's seen some of that hit, Facebook's seen some of that hit. We're seeing a reduction in mail volume. But at the same time, I think our e-commerce package volume has gone up. We expect that trend to actually continue, because we expect that e-commerce adoption to stay, to be a change in the consumer behavior for an ongoing period. We've seen an acceleration of several trends. One of them is e-commerce adoption. And as such, we think for an extended period of time, we'll have more people involved and engaged in more consumers engaged in e-commerce than we've had before, and essentially it'll be on a new trajectory. The implication that it has for postal services and for last mile deliveries, I think, comes from the fact that that increased adoption of e-commerce will provide critical mass and critical usage for multiple business models and delivery models. And that's something that would have taken 3 to 5 years, but is probably going to get accelerated. So that gives us an opportunity to experiment. It gives us an opportunity to get into more businesses, and to some extent, where we have an advantage over a UPS or a FedEx is that we'll go to every household every day. And so for us, those B2C, a higher saturation of B2C deliveries is great for our business.
Yeah, that's very insightful, and I think it's really interesting because obviously you're representing the United States. How is that being affected in Switzerland? Would love to hear your insights, Roland.
Well, we try to foster innovation, technology-driven, but also problem-driven. So yes, of course, we do have a technology radar. We observe and want to know and build our expertise in new technologies, all them like AI, blockchain, automation, whatever. But we do not see ourselves as a technology company. So we always try to partner with technology providers, such as Matternet, for example, or Starship, or other technology providers. And what we try to add is a business solution for our partners. And on the other side, we also have the problem-driven innovation. So, for example, right now with COVID-19, where we are facing new challenges, and we do not start with the technology in the first place, but we start with the new problem. So, for example, we have an app in place. It's actually, we're doing a pilot. It was designed to support our customer service team, where they can video consulting our customer with a complaint, and we could easily send them a link and use their smartphone and the camera to capture what is their problem, for example, with a broken parcel. But now with COVID-19, we realized that medical specialists, doctors, they have a new need. They, first of all, they don't want everyone to, come into their office. And so we offer them now for free this new technology because it's a new need. And actually the technology behind is not very, rocket science. But the solution is really helpful, especially with this need. So what we try to do is we want to understand the upcoming technologies. We want to know what chances these technologies bring. But on the other side, we try to understand the problem of our customers and the problems of we want to address.
Yeah, no, it's very insightful. I know you guys are very diversified also at Swiss Post. You have a medical practice, banking, you have insurance. It's quite diversified.
Yes, it is. And we think that, for example, the e-health market or the health market is something which brings a lot of opportunities for postal organizations. Because, in the old times, all these informations, they were on a physical object, and it was a postal organization transporting, connecting all these providers in the health market. And now with digitalization, we think we are the ones who can transport these information best, physically or digitally. So what we have to do is we have to, have the skills, we have to have the understanding of these new markets, we have to understand the needs and the regulation, and then bring all our assets into this field. So yes, we are active in, for example, the health market.
Yeah, that's that's great. And I know Ando-san, you guys at Japan Post are also very well diversified. I mean, you guys are massive in Japan, one of the largest insurance companies, but also huge in banking. Would love to hear just kind of, Ando-san, what you guys are seeing in the market in Japan as a result of technology trends regarding the current situation with the COVID virus.
Oh, okay. So I may echo some of the points Sachin and Roland already touched upon. But I think it's a great opportunity for the Japanese society to accelerate the digital transformation. And we don't have that much of the culture of a work from home, but at the headquarters, we are trying to minimize the workforce have to be physically in the office. So the target is like a 20-30%, maybe still like a 1/5 of the people still staying in the office. But that's a dramatic decrease for us. And we have the culture of like using stamps and signatures for the document, maybe similar to other countries, but we are less adopted to the digital solution. However, for the first time, we have to adapt ourselves into more digital friendly service. So for instance, when we deliver things, usually postal worker get the stamp called hanko from the households, but in this time it can be very dangerous. So we are trying to look at some of the operational workflow where we can efficiently run, and also taking care of the safety. And interestingly, we have a high burden of the redelivery of the stuff to the households. So if traditionally, if there's no one picking up the package, we deliver within in a day or so. But that cost is very significant. But under the lockdown or shelter in place, everyone's staying at home. So we are interestingly minimize the redelivery cost. And however, we still have a bit of a difficulty to keep the essential workforce. So we are discussing how we can promote more of the last mile delivery robots, like kind of like a robots. And in the past, we have a bit of like impediments from like a government regulations or laws. But government is very much supportive to change those like laws and local ordinance, so that we can foster like a contactless delivery to maintain the safety.
Yeah, no, that's very important. Brody, does that all line up kind of what you're seeing around the world? I know you work with so many postal services. Would love to hear your thoughts on what you're seeing around the world with current technology trends.
Mike, that lines up extremely well with what we're seeing. As we've begun the analysis of what the new normal will look like in conjunction with our retail practice, our estimate is that e-commerce as a percentage of total retail will be up somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 basis points in each of the geographies. And that's going to change a little bit dependent on how mature e-commerce was previously. So a place like the UK will probably be up less than 1,500, and a place like Italy, for example, will probably be up on the higher end of that. And so to Sachin's point, that volume is here to stay. And while you're experiencing peak or near peak like volumes right now, those will come down. However, e-commerce is going to be a far different world than it will be in the future. And mail volumes, again, down everywhere in the world that we have studied, somewhere between 20 and 30%. So it's a pretty consistent story. As I think of the technologies that will be most important going forward, and some of these have already been touched on by Ando-san and Roland. Small scale automation, I think, is going to be critical as the ability to scale up and down rapidly in the midst of this will become more important. Things that will enable last mile efficiency and local last mile in particular. One of the things that we're clearly seeing in the retail side of our business is that there's been a big push toward click and collect or BOPIS, depending on how you want to frame it. And that means that there's going to be a lot more use of local inventory, and that will then change the type of content coming into these networks and the need for last mile automation and new last mile solutions. And then the third is there's going to be an absolute requirement for digital elements to each of those physical products. So Ando-san was talking about the kind of the ability to have a digital touch point on delivery, or some of the things that Roland was talking about around kind of that virtual connection. For parcel delivery, it's going to be things like redirection and control of the delivery. And for mail, it's going to be things like what USPS has done with informed delivery and creating a digital component there. As you look at how you can have a digital element, is one of the clear changes that we'll see coming out of this is a preference toward digital and virtual and away from physical and touchable. And so things that have a digital element will have an advantage in this new normal.
Yeah, I'm sure that's very reassuring for a lot of the startups that we work with, and great news. I mean, one startup we invested in a few years ago is Rappi, which is just booming right now. Some of my colleagues were speaking to the founders, and their volumes are going crazy. They're doing a lot of last mile deliveries. We've also dealt with a lot of these kind of robots that will deliver, like, let's say, food to your door, like we like Kiwi robots or Starship or some of them. I know Ando-san, you mentioned that as an opportunity. We've seen challenges with the business model. Like, we've always been concerned about whether or not this can be done at scale. Would love to hear kind of, like, we talked a little bit about the trends that we see now because of the COVID virus, but how are these technology trends going to evolve? Another startup that we've met and had presented some of our events, Sachin, you probably remember, is Agility Robotics, which has like these legs that they'll walk, and if they can put a parcel on those legs and just drop it off, I mean, that's super interesting because they could go up steps and technically drop it off at someone's door. Or even autonomous robots, like, what are some of the trends in the next 2, 5, 10 years you guys see coming out of this and moving? I know I definitely see this situation we're in right now accelerating the need for these innovations. But what are some of the predictions you guys see in the market? Maybe Sachin, I would love to start with you.
So I think a lot of these automation trends, things like autonomous deliveries, including drones, etc., are going to have, we're going to see some exciting developments in those space. But in the 2 to 5 year period, I expect that to still remain niche. I expect that to be a minority of the packages, minority of deliveries be made through that. I think most of what we are going to see is going to be more around improvements in coordination. Now, if you think about the 8 startups that we listened to today, all of them are addressing 2 out of 3 of these of challenges around visibility, cost, and speed. And so if you think about these 3 factors around e-commerce delivery, all 8 of these are addressing 2 out of these 3. And if you kind of overlay a customer experience element, I think that's where the next 2 to 5 years is going to lie. The postal services in just about every market, and listening to Roland and Ando talk about this as well, the one advantage that we have over any other entity in each of our markets is a saturation, right? So we have density of assets, be it physical post offices, be it delivery vehicles, whatever that mode is, we have a level of saturation. Between that asset and technology in addressing speed, cost, and visibility, I think the next 2 to 5 years is really going to be around bringing more customers in terms of merchants and more consumers into the e-commerce space. And that's where we're going to see a lot more development.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's go with the next person. Would love to see what you're seeing in Switzerland, Roland.
I would like to build on what was just said, because we did quite some tests and piloted autonomous delivery with robots outdoor. And as mentioned before, the business case is really a challenge. And also the regulation is challenging. So what we did with driverless buses, we tried to test all these elements. So the technical part is really something we have to know. We have to know what is possible, but it's just one element. And in order to innovate, we have to be best in class in more than the technical aspect. We have to embrace and the user. For example, with the bus, do they accept to jump in a bus without the driver? It's the same with the robots. If you're standing on a corner of a street and a robot passes by, how do people react? So these are the questions we raised, and we did tests. Yes, we did some delivery with autonomous delivery robots from Starship, and we find out that technology is, yes, there are some challenges, but more other questions are not well addressed yet. So we moved into a new field. And just think about the decades ago when postal organizations delivered letters to the door front of business customers, and then they enlarged the value chain and jumped into the house of our business partners and did delivery in-house. So that's what we do now with our robots, because there we find a different setting of regulation. There we have to deal with other customers. It's easier to control the needs of the, or to understand the needs of the customer. It's easier to establish a business. So what we do now, we moved into indoor deliveries. And again, in our case, it's in healthcare. So that's what we do now. We stopped our pilot outdoor delivery with robots, and we continue to do tests in-house. In our case, it's a hospital where we think we can add some value with autonomous delivery in-house.
Yeah. Yeah. That's no, that's super interesting. I know you guys have done a lot of these tests and utilized a lot of these startups and new technologies. So that's great to hear your insights. Ando-san, would love to hear your insights and what does the future hold for startups and new technologies for Japan Post?
Yes, so we've been seeing many startups in the supply chain logistics vertical in the past 2 years or so. And, there has been like an IoT solution, robotic solution, something to do with like a warehouse, last mile. But I think that because of the current difficult environment, we have to focus on kind of like a low-hanging fruit where we can conduct the proof of concept studies like remotely or digitally. So some of the spaces may have a bit of a challenge looking at the coming 3 years. But I would say low-hanging fruit is somewhere in the digital digital transformation, like a software, like a RPA, robotic process automation kind of stuff, and also like a last mile delivery robotics. But the things like IoT sensoring can be a little bit difficult depending on the technology they are based on, like infrastructure wise. So 2020, we supposedly to start a robust like a 5G implementation, but the 5G may challenge a bit of difficulty implementing because of the current situation. So some of the verticals maybe slow down in terms of innovation, but if the really strong startups, I think it'll be a fantastic opportunity to come up with a very solid, strong business model. From the perspective of the postal operators around the world, I think mail volume is going to go down more and more, and e-commerce shipping is gonna increase like dramatically, and we have to adapt to that a new challenge very rapidly. But postal service tend to be slow because we are almost like a big organization, so we don't want to be a dinosaur. We cannot be a dinosaur. We cannot afford to be a dinosaur because we are in the essential business. And looking at other industries, say like a music industry, used to be people buy like a CDs and like a record, but when they turned into digital, coming like a for first 5-10 years they struggled. So maybe we are facing the similar trend, and right now we are in the inflection point to really change the business model. And I think coming 2 to 5 years would be a great time to adapt to our new like a business model, and maybe by 2030 with physical internet will be more advanced, and our business will look much different. And I think it's going to be very interesting for sure for the decade to come.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said. And you brought up an interesting point about 5G. I think that's a lot of these robotics applications will require 5G technology to be optimal inside of the warehouses, for example. I know we work a lot with Ericsson, and they always promote kind of how their 5G technology is going to be utilized in the new industrial kind of age of IoT. So it's super interesting, and that will definitely be a challenge. Hopefully it's not too much of a challenge, but thank you. Those great insights, Ando-san. Brody, I know we have limited time on the panel, so I wish we could continue this conversation. So Brody, would love to hear your kind of insights, and I know you represent, again, the global kind of postal market. So would love to hear kind of your thoughts. Do you agree with everything that was said, or are there any others areas that you think are relevant for everyone to hear about?
I definitely agree. And as we've looked at the amount of startup activity in this space, back in 2013, it was about 266 million of capital, venture capital flowing in here. Last year, it was 7.2 billion. So it gives you a sense of the magnitude of change in startup activity in and around this space as e-commerce grows, and as I think all of these companies are seeing the opportunity. I think Sachin hit on it best with the breadth of the network that postal organizations have. We see them as the best place to really take advantage of some of these trends that are occurring of localization, of inventory and the demand for faster, lower cost delivery. They are well positioned to be able to deliver that. As I think about digital, we kind of think of it in three waves, if you will. The first is using digital to take cost out. Some of the automation items that Roland was talking about, right? The indoor automation that you can use. From there, it's digitizing delivery. So it's putting a digital component onto the physical. And then that third wave is about driving revenue growth. And you really have to go through them in that sequence, is what we found as we've analyzed this. Taking cost out using digital frees up capital and gets the board aligned. They realize that there's a business case to be had with digital. When you digitize delivery, it then starts to change your brand within the market and you start to be seen as a digital entity. And with those two in place, then you can start to really use digital to drive new revenue opportunities. So as you think about all these technologies that are emerging, that construct I find useful is to kind of figure out the use case, right? Where it applies, what's the business problem you're trying to solve, and go after it that way.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Brody, and thank you all the panelists. We appreciate you guys' insights on the kind of the postal market, what's happening today and what's happening with innovation. I also appreciate all the postal services around the world that dialed in, that we're not on the panel, but we're listening in. We're super excited about the opportunities that lie ahead in the market and opportunities for the startups in the postal services market. So with that, I'll pass it back to Sean, who can wrap everything up.